Hi folks, Rob Flux here from Property Developer Network, coming to you for yet another Sunday session. This week's session's a little bit different. We're going to be talking about how to actually get a better credit score. I'm going to go through some of the tips and tricks that I've used over the years to build a massive score of 1,097 out of a possible 1,200 on my credit rating. So if you want to know how it's done, stay tuned folks, and I'll show you exactly how. Give me 2 secs. Okay, so as I said, credit score 1,097 out of a possible 1,200. On your credit report, if you actually subscribe to these things, that's what that looks like. It gives me an excellent credit rating, despite the number of, I guess, entities that I actually manage, which is actually a challenge on achieving such a high score. But I'll go into some of the insights of that and how you can actually achieve this as we go. Now, in order to get a credit score or a credit report, it's actually possible for you to actually subscribe and get the credit report for free. Now, there are 3 different providers around Australia that actually allow you to do that. So there is Equifax, Experian, and Illion. All 3 of these are credit providers or credit bureaus, as they're actually known in the industry. They all have services that you can subscribe to for free, but they also have paid services. And I'm going to touch on some of the paid services and why you might want to use some of the paid services. Typically, if you're using a free service, then they will make you wait for up to 10 days in order to actually achieve your report. And usually you can only get 1 copy of your report every year. And hence they will then give you an upgrade to a paid service if you're wanting to get more copies of that, or if you're wanting that in less of a timeline. Highly recommend the paid services as they sit out there in order to enact some of the tips and tricks that I'm actually going for, because you're going to want to see not only that your score has actually been updated, but you're going to want to see every time somebody actually interacts with your credit file along the way. Now, who can actually see my credit score? Well, there's a number of different people that actually are allowed to do inquiries against your credit reports and your credit scores. So new employers can actually do that if you've signed the appropriate privacy statements to see if they're going to be employing someone that they can actually trust. Insurance providers will determine how risky you are as a customer for them. Landlords and real estate agents will typically do that also to determine whether or not rent will be paid on time and things like that. Your telcos, so mobile phone providers and that sort of thing, will almost always do that, because you're going to go onto a subscription plan in most instances when you're buying your mobile phone plan. And banks and lenders, which is the one that we're all used to. I guess banks and lenders, every time you want to apply for a loan or a credit card or something along those lines, those guys all go and do, I guess, searches against your report. Now, I touched on the fact that you can get these as a free report, but you can also do paid services. Now, I use a company called Equifax. Now, these are the fees and charges that Equifax charge for their different services. So you can see what you can actually get for free. So you can see what your reports have been declined. If you've been declined for credit in the last 90 odd days, you can get 1 report every year, those sorts of things. Or you can start paying, I guess, a number of different levels of service, depending upon what it is that you're actually looking for. Now, you'll notice that anything from the $4.95 upwards gives you credit alerts. That means every single time somebody touches your credit file, you're going to get an alert to say, hey, somebody's gone and actually had a look. However, if you are at the cheaper end of the scale, you will still only get 1 report per year, but you will get the alerts as often as you like. Or you can go on to, I guess, the higher level service, and you'll get a monthly score. So you'll get the monthly updates as you go. And you'll also get 4 reports a year, and it goes up and up the scale as you go. Now, I guess in the early days when you're trying to improve your credit score, you may want to subscribe to one of the higher levels of service. Once you've actually cleaned up your score, you probably only need something that's actually going to keep your alerts up to date. Now, the thing with the fact that there are 3 credit bureaus, they each have different costs and different Price points, I'm just touching on the one that I use. No doubt there might be better deals out there, but this is the one I've been using for many, many years. What is interesting to note, though, is that each of those credit bureaus actually keep their own database of files. And what you may find is that one particular bureau might have a black mark against you in one department that the other bureau has not picked up. And so I would highly encourage that at the start of the process, you at least go back to, I guess, the free providers. That's these guys here. Go back to these free providers and get at minimum that free report from each of them the very first instance, so you can then compare and make sure they're all the same and see where the black marks actually are, and then from there start the process of actually repairing your credit file. Now let's go into this in a little bit more detail. So what is actually on a credit report? So there's a number of things. So I guess the credit products that you've actually applied for. So this is going to be who the credit provider is, what the limit is that you actually went for, when you actually applied for the loan, what names will actually be on there, what type of credit you've applied for. Is it a car loan? Is it a credit loan? Is it a home loan? Is it a mobile phone service, for example? So the different kinds of loan application that you've actually gone for. Then what is your repayment history? So you're going to be, how much was the bill? When did you pay? When were the amounts due? How often you paid? Did you pay by the due date? All of those sorts of things, because these guys are keeping track of every single time you make a payment, which means that if you miss a payment, if you get a late bill or anything like that, you are in danger of being on the naughty list. And once you're on the naughty list, that lives on your file for quite some time. So it's a matter of going back and looking at, well, how long ago was I on that naughty list and what can I do to clean that up? Anytime you miss a payment and it's not paid within a certain period of time, and that will change for each provider, then you are in danger of actually going onto that naughty list. So things like your defaults. Now, the people who tend to be really critical on these things are your utility providers. So your water, your rates, your sewerage, all that sort of thing, credit cards and any loans. These guys are the ones that are likely to going to put a default against your credit file. Now, when they do so, I guess the service provider is able to lodge a default if the amount is over $150, okay? And your more than 60 days has passed since the due date, okay? Now, they also have to go through a process of actually notifying you, make sure that they send you reminder notices, all that sort of thing. And if they do that, then that little black mark, that little naughty list that I was talking about will stay on your file for 5 years, okay? Now, if it gets to the point where they've actually gone and initiated, I guess, people to come and actually chase you for the debt, so debt providers and that sort of thing, or then that's what they call a clear out file, in which case it will actually live 7 years on your file. So it's really, really important that you are very up to date with your payments. Now, notice that it's needs to be 60 days. So if you're a little bit late, you don't need to panic, okay? But it is certainly something that you should certainly be proactive on, and making sure that you are always up to date as much as humanly possible on your bills, okay? If you've paid your debt and that sort of thing, then even though you had the naughty list and then paid, it doesn't automatically clear up the fact that you were on the naughty list. So even though you are actually up to date, so make sure that it is actually paid on time, folks. Really, really critical. So other things that are on your credit file, any applications that you've actually gone for, I touched on this before, and how many applications you've made, the total amount that you've actually borrowed, and any loans that you may be a personal guarantee for. One of the challenges that I know is that you'll go to a loan broker. A loan broker might apply to 3 or 4 different banks in order to get you the loan that you actually need, which means that all 3 banks then do a check on your credit file, which means that your credit file gets a hit 3 individual times. So the first guy sees no hit, the second guy sees the first guy had hit the file, and the third guy sees that there were 2 other hits. Now, as each person does a check on your file, that actually impacts your score. And clearly the third guy that actually looks at it is going to be looking at that a little bit more negatively than the first two. Now, I'm going to give you some tips and tricks on how to manage that a little bit later, but just be mindful of the fact that that does actually occur. Any bankruptcy and or debt agreements that you might actually get into. So if you do get into financial strife, and some of us do from time to time, then when you actually make an arrangement with your credit provider to actually repay that, whether it be either a formal or informal type document, where it starts to go down the formal process, those debt agreements or any court judgments or anything like that then start to register against your file, and they will sit there for a very long period of time. And I'm going to touch on how long they live in just a sec. Okay, so make sure that you don't get to a position where you have to go through the formal debt agreement process or the bankruptcy process if you can humanly avoid it. Now let's have a look at what actually lives on file. So your credit repayment history, okay? So this is how often you are paying your bills, like your credit card, like your utilities, like your phone bill, that sort of thing. That lives on there for a period of 2 years. And note that there is actually an asterisk here. So basically it comes down the bottom and says, not only is it for 2 years, but it's actually a rolling 2-year period. And it will be 2 years after you've actually closed the account. Then any credit history and your accounts, so what your, I guess the history of payments and that sort of thing will be. Any credit inquiries, so anyone who's done an inquiry against you will live on there for 5 years. So I touched on before, the people that can do a credit inquiry, it might be an employer, it might be a landlord, for example. That history and that search lives on your account for 5 years. Any defaults that you've made, so any overdue bills or things like that, that will live on there for 5 years, okay? Where that gets to a serious default, where they've actually had to get debt collectors in to try and claim that, that will then live there for 7 years. And if you then go for a formal bankruptcy or anything where you've got a formal, I guess, renegotiation with your credit providers, that will live there for up to 5 years, depending upon, I guess, the level of, I guess, the severity of that document. So quite important that you understand which records stay for how long, and that if you're trying to clean up something on the naughty list, it may take a little time for it to actually wash out of the system, okay? Now, how is my score actually calculated? So there's a number of things that actually go into your score. So firstly, the first thing that goes into it is your personal information. So your age, how long you've been employed, and the amount of time you've been at your current address. All of that goes to show the stability of you as an individual, and hence, if you're not moving around a lot and that sort of thing, and you're staying at the same employer, that shows stability and that impacts massively. The age of your credit report. So if you have not created a credit report, when you can get a credit report from the moment you turn 18 if you apply for credit. But if you don't apply for a credit card until the age of 25, you won't have any credit history at all. So the younger you are, the more likely you need to actually create the better it is for you to actually create that credit file by actually going and applying for credit. Now, applying for it doesn't mean actually using it. It just means that you can demonstrate that you actually have a credit file that has some longevity, okay? The next one would be the type of credit providers. So there are a number of different types of credit providers. There's credit cards, there's mobile phones, there's car loans, there's home loans. So if you've got a splattering of credit across the board, that is actually quite beneficial to you. But if you've got them all jammed into one and they're all in the credit card department, and you've got a ton of them, that can actually go against you. So what credit you've actually held and the credit limit. So how many cards you've got, how much debt you loan, the more you owe, and combined with, have you been able to consistently pay that, actually goes towards a positive score. So I guess the amount that you owe starts as a negative, but as you demonstrate proof that you can actually pay that, then you actually start to accumulate more points towards that as well. The number of credit inquiries actually listed on your report can be quite negative. So you want to make sure that you want to minimize the number of credit reports, credit inquiries on your report as humanly possible. Now, there are times when fraudulent applications may actually go through, so you have the ability to try and clean those up. But majority of the time, if you're applying for 1, 2, 3, 4 credit cards or multiple loans, all of those credit inquiries are actually going to show up. Then there's the pattern of your credit inquiries and your shopping habits over time. So if you are regular and consistent, that shows as a positive on your credit file. If you are haphazard and you go through a shopping burst and go apply for a whole bunch of credit cards all at the same time and max out your limits at a very short amount of time, that shows a little bit of instability. And so that might actually be a little bit of a challenge, okay? Any defaults? So have you got overdue debts? Have you got serious credit card infringements and that sort of things? Have they actually sent debt collectors out to actually claim any money against you? And have you got any court writs or judgments or anything along those lines that might be working against you, for example? All of those go towards impacting your credit score. Now, the credit scoring system, I showed you the one from Equifax before. Equifax is actually out of 1,200. Some of the other providers are out of 1,000, but you get a good indication here. So, you know, I'm right up there with my credit score. I'm very high into that excellent category, but you can see that pretty much broke it up into, I guess, 20%, 40%, 60%, 80%, 100%. So below average, average, good, very good, and excellent based on the score that you're actually going to be getting. Now, they don't give you the exact element, you know, when you get a hit on your file, they don't say exactly how many points that does. That's a secret little algorithm they try to keep to themselves because they don't want you to manipulate the outcome. You know, the less that you do in some areas, the better that you are. Now, Experian, who is one of the other providers, their scoring system is out of 1,000. So very slightly different scoring system, but again, similar sort of naming conventions and similar sort of percentiles is how they actually break it up. Now, what does your credit file look like? Well, I'm not going to show you my entire credit file, but here is the cover page. And you can get a little bit of an insight as some of the things that it actually covers. So it tells how many credit inquiries you've actually had, what liabilities you might have, what directorships you've got, how many people have done inquiries, how many people have accessed your file in the last little while, any court judgments, any writs, any summonses, all that sort of thing. So you can see it's quite a detailed report. And so my guidance to you is get the free version of this from each of your 3 providers, go through every single one of those categories and start working out who has done what on your file and see whether or not there's an opportunity to go back and clean it up. So for example, if you've got an overdue bill, go and pay it. It will tell you who the overdue bill is. Sometimes you don't know where that overdue bill has come from because you may have moved addresses. The bill was never sent to you because you didn't update your old address. It was sent to the old address. And so sometimes you'll have something sitting there for years and years and have no idea at all what it looks like. The next thing that you have is the payment history or repayment history, and you'll see green ticks along the way. And these little orange ones, the payment has not yet been reported. Now that sometimes there's a little bit of a lag in the reporting system. So I can assure you that all of those will be green ticks when they actually catch up with their reporting. But you'll see that down the bottom, they've got this scoring system, how many days overdue that it may have been. So you'll have little crosses or that sort of thing that go onto your file for each of your different accounts that might actually sit out there. So you want to be really careful that you're always paying your bills on time, because that sits there, as I said, will sit there as a rolling period for 2 years. So you can see here that when this month comes in, this month will pop off, okay? And so it's a rolling 2-year period at any one point in time. And when you close down that account, it will slowly roll out. So if you do have a glitch in your system, so let's just say I had a bad payment month this month, it will take 2 years for that to roll out before it disappears off and gives me a clean bill of health again. So always make sure that you're paying your bills on time. So if you have bad credit, what can you do? So if you're actually behind in your payments and you're not able to pay your bills and that sort of thing, the best thing that you can actually do is go and talk to your creditors and try to renegotiate payments before they actually initiate proceedings against you. And it's important that you do it beforehand, okay? Now, when you do that, you can renegotiate sometimes the payments. You can sometimes renegotiate a deferral. So for example, right now under COVID, most of the banks have got mortgage moratoriums where you can defer your payments. You might have a period where, for example, you're of poor health, and they may say, well, you've got 3 months where we won't be chasing you for the debt on that, for example. So you can do that through an informal arrangement. So an informal arrangement means that it's not in writing. If it's not in writing, well, I guess will it be an email correspondence back and forth, but it's not actually going to hit your file, which is really what you're wanting to do. So if you're proactive, you can typically get those informal arrangements in place. The next thing you could do would be to do debt consolidation. You might have a number of debts with a number of different providers. So perhaps you would roll those debts into say a third provider who might give you 6 months of zero interest. So you close out the old debt, pay that back, make sure you clean up that file, and then you've got 6 months of zero interest where you might be able to then use that period to catch up the repayments, for example. So that can also be done in many, many instances. You can come to a debt agreement. So a debt agreement might be a formal, legally binding arrangement between you and the creditors to repay the debts. Now, that debt agreement can sometimes renegotiate the amount of debt owed. So, for example, if you believe that you are in a position where you might be going into a prolonged period of inability to pay, which would have the potential to take you into a bankruptcy situation, you can have a conversation with your lender and say, look, my intention is to pay everything humanly possible, but the reality is that I'm not going to. And if I go bankrupt, I won't be able to pay you anything. So why don't we renegotiate the amount of debt that's actually outstanding? And if you do that, if you renegotiate the amount of debt, you might get 50 cents in the dollar or 30 cents in the dollar on what is actually owed. That becomes a formal arrangement, and that would potentially hit your file, but you can, in part of that process, make sure that you negotiate that it doesn't become a negative against your file, okay? So it's going to show that you have I guess, cleaned up any arrears and things like that. You want them to actually go and clean up the arrears once you've actually renegotiated that. Important that you actually ask for that and you negotiate that through the process, because if you don't, it may take upwards of 2 years to roll out. Now, you can also go through, I guess, similarly, a personal insolvency agreement and or bankruptcy proceedings, which I guess is when you're quite, I guess, a long way into that process and probably beyond the ability to actually recover at that point. So the best bet is be proactive and go in early if you think you're going to be in trouble. Reason why I'm raising this right now is we are at record unemployment. We are also in I guess the worst recession since the 1930s, since the Great Depression. And there are a number of people who've been on mortgage deferrals for some period of time that might be in a position where they can recognize that, hey, this is something that's actually potentially plausible, that these sorts of things could actually occur to me. And so it's best to be proactive and start the informal arrangement and actually going and proactively reaching out to your lender right now and coming to an amicable solution before they actually send the nasty grams out after you. Okay, so what are some of the things that you can't change or remove from your file? Well, anything that is actually factually correct, you can't actually change. So you can get errors cleaned up. So if they've spelt your name wrong, or if they got your address wrong, or things like that. If you had paid a bill and you can prove that you paid a bill and they had it as a negative against you, you can have that cleaned up. But if it was genuinely that you were in arrears, and if it was more than $150 and it was overdue by more than 60 days, you will not be able to remove that from your file, okay? Now, the only possible way that you could do that, and I say possible way, is if you negotiate, as I said, with your bank provider to say, well, a condition of me renegotiating my terms is you go back and clean up my file. Now, it's only the credit provider that can actually do that. It is not the credit reporting agency that can do that on your behalf. So you need to chase every single one of your creditors if you want them to clean up your file one by one, okay? Otherwise, they're going to stay on your report for 5 odd years. Okay, so some tips to improve your credit score. Check your credit report regularly, okay? This is really, really important. If you keep that up to date and, as I said, if you subscribe to those services where you get the alerts, then you'll be able to constantly monitor anything that hits your file at any point in time and make sure that you are proactive in doing it. In doing so, you want to make sure that you clean up any errors. Anecdotally, some of the reports that I've seen is anywhere up to 70% of people's credit files actually have errors in some way, shape, or form. It might be that your address is incorrect, or it might be that your name is spelt incorrect. It might be that a payment that you actually made didn't hit the file appropriately, those sorts of things. So go and check, go and actually clean it up, make sure, and be proactive in doing that. You want to go and check for, I guess, the high risk listings. So the things that actually impact your score, okay? Make sure that you don't do multiple credit card applications at the same time. Those things are going to be nasty. So make sure you're being very clear and deliberate with what you're actually doing. Remove any incorrect information. I've already touched on that one, but that helps massively. And identify any listings that that you can actually improve. Okay, so sometimes you've got a credit report for things that are invalid, so things you no longer have. Now, or you might have opportunities, as I said, to do debt consolidation. So if you're negatively impacted because you've got 4 credit cards, then why don't you consolidate those down, roll that over and only have a single credit card, or reduce your limits might be another opportunity to clean that up, okay? Some other things to think about would be keep an eye on your score and your credit always. You know, make sure that you're checking your finances, making sure that where possible, you're paying things through direct debit type arrangements so that things are just happening automatically. Use a variety of credit. So you want to make sure that you've got car loans, credit cards, mortgages, phones, all that sort of thing. So there's a bit of a splattering across the board that will actually massively lift your score up. Now, don't do things unnecessarily. You know, if you don't need a car loan, don't go get a car loan. But, you know, it's one of those things where you can say, well, if I was going to do a personal loan versus a car loan, you know, start to make some choices. If you've missed payments, make sure that you get up to date straight away, okay? Go and clean that up, and if possible, clean it up within 60 days. If you're actually behind, be proactive and actually go and chase that, because as soon as it hits that 60-day mark, it's likely to actually hit as a default. So pay your bills on time means that you never have to be impacted by that, okay? Next one is pay down any existing loans and debts. So if you've got the opportunity to pay down a debt, it demonstrates that not only have you been able to get the credit, but you've been able to manage that credit appropriately. That will massively improve your score. If you have credit cards, make sure you manage them responsibly. Okay, so don't max them out all the time, because that's just going to cause all sorts of pain for you. But be proactive and pay the debt down at the end of the month so that you're paying it out 100% in full. If you do that, you'll be accumulating frequent flyer miles and that sort of thing, or rewards points, but you won't actually be incurring interest. And make sure you don't apply for too many credit cards. I've touched on this one already. And this is going to sound a little bit strange, but if you've got a credit card that you're not using, don't actually throw it away, okay? If it's sitting there with a limit that is unused, it is still actually accumulating points for you, because it's showing that you have that limit and it is actually technically being paid on time because you're not actually consuming it. And so that actually lifts your score. So if you are appropriately managing it, closing it down unnecessarily is not going to be helping massively. Paying off any default will not remove the nasty mark on your score, okay? So unless you have negotiated with the creditor to clean up your file through a negotiated decision process, so just paying it by default will not clean it up. You may have to wait 5 years for it to walk, slide off your scale. Always contact your credit provider wherever humanly possible to initiate proceedings proactively, okay? So don't wait until it's too late. Don't wait until the unlisted numbers are calling you and then you're hanging up on them all the time. If you're getting to that point, then you're actually going to be a little bit in trouble. What you want to do is actually call them proactively and start to negotiate how and when you're going to pay those things. Don't open a lot of accounts too rapidly. So don't go bang, 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 and open 4 or 5 in a week or the like. Slow, deliberate, methodical processes over a long period of time that show good spending habits and good credit habits are really what you're trying to achieve here. And again, closing an account doesn't make the hit on that file that you, just because you opened it, that actually was a hit on your file. When you close it, that hit stays on your file until it washes out in a couple of years' time. So, if you have done something a little bit reactionary, even if you close it down, you're just going to have to wait for that to be patient. And the other thing is, don't change your houses or don't change your job too frequency, okay? Lenders are going to see that as instability, okay? They're looking for stability of your character. They're looking at your staying power at your work and your ability to and your robustness to be reliable in the marketplace. So that's actually a negative. Plus, every time you change jobs is an opportunity for a bill to be sent to an old address. Not jobs, every time you change houses, sent to an old address, and you might actually not get that bill sent to the correct address. So things that can slip and ruin your credit score, okay? Moving address, as I said, if you move an address, old bills get sent to the old address. You don't know that the old bill has been sent. It goes unpaid. Therefore, that then causes a black mark on your file. You didn't even know that you had a black mark on your file. Sometimes those things can sit there for many, many years. Switching banks or credit cards can often occur a flurry of activity on your account in a very short period of time. So make sure that you're consistent with all of your personal details with regards to your address, your phone numbers, your email address, those sorts of things as much as you can. Traveling overseas, if it's work related and you have no choice, then understand, but traveling overseas can actually, depending upon the jurisdiction you're going to, can also sometimes negatively impact your score. Anytime there's a debt collector that's chasing you for payment is a common one. Unpaid tolls. Now, these things are like kryptonite, because as you're driving, your car goes beep, and so you think the payment has actually gone through, but you don't know whether or not the credit card has actually expired under the covers or things like that. So make sure that you are always on top of those things, and applying for finance or credit, if you do too much in too short a time, can actually be problematic. and just forgetting to pay a bill. You know, nasty, nasty, nasty if you just forget to pay a bill. So make sure that you are always on top of that. Now, my little secret sauce, and one of the things that has helped me massively once I went to the effort of cleaning up my file, the most important thing for me going through the number of loans that I go through in order to do what I do is how do I minimize the amount of hits on my file, the number of inquiries on my file. So this is my little secret sauce, okay? If you get your credit file as clean as humanly possible, then every time you apply for a new loan, there's a thing called a privacy statement. If you do not sign the privacy statement for your loan application, you are not giving your bank or your credit provider permission to hit your credit file. So that privacy statement is usually on, you know, somewhere towards the back of the document. You've usually signed your about 5 times inside the loan application already, but one of those is, hey, can I please have permission to hit your credit file? So what I always do is sign everything but the privacy statement. And what I say to the lender is, look, I will give you a copy of my credit file, which will then allow you to do a conditional approval. And only when I get the conditional approval will I then sign the actual privacy agreement to allow you to formally hit my file and sanity check that. That way I can go out to 2 or 3 banks if need be. I can get the best rate humanly possible, make sure that I can actually get the loan, and only to the successful bank do I actually allow them to hit my credit file. That stops a massive number of applications hitting my file. And in many instances, I've found that when I've provided that, remember, I'm paying to get this credit file every month, so they can see it's up to date already. In many instances, they've just taken that credit file at face value and not actually done their own credit search. So once you've got it clean, then you know, it's a great way for keeping it clean. So hopefully you guys got plenty out of that. Just a little reminder that we do these little Sunday sessions every single Sunday at 5 p.m. Brisbane time. I note Brisbane time because we've just gone daylight saving, which means that for many of you around the country, your times are going to change. So make sure you go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/Property Developer Network, like the page, and then you will get the alerts every single time we go live. Now, I say almost every Sunday. Next week, we will not be doing a Sunday session. Instead, we are doing a very special event. That is called the New Rules of Property Development. So it will be Sunday, but it'll be Sunday morning. It's a 4-hour half-day event between 9 a.m. and 1 p.m. It is, I guess, a follow-up to the previous half-day event that I did about 4 or 5 months ago called The Perfect Storm. And the nuts and the bolts of it are that we have got so much changing at the moment with regards to what is happening in the market because of the impacts of COVID. We are in the greatest recession since the Great Depression. We've got the highest level of unemployment. We've got record low interest rates. We've got a lot of demand for property, but nobody, you know, all the drivers for population growth and all those sorts of things are pointing in the right direction. But we don't have enough people with jobs able to take on those properties. So the way that we are going to acquire property is going to be very different over the next 6 to 12 months. And we've got a lot of people who are unemployed at the moment who are going to be in a little bit of mortgage distress, hence why we actually put this topic on today to try and help those people to try and make sure it's not going to negatively impact their file. Now, if you want to come to this New Rules of Property Development event, here are the details. There is a secret little URL that I will post into the chat window in a couple of moments. And it's actually in the description of this page already, but I will post it into the comments in a sec. And we would love to see you there. These huge changes have been coming for the last 6 months, and I see that they're going to change even more over the future. The government is doing everything it can to prop up our economy, but you know, it's moving like quicksand at the moment. So you need to be abreast of everything that's happening and make sure that you are not operating under the old rules of the old paradigm with everything changing so rapidly underneath. Also, a quick reminder that we also run a couple of Facebook groups. So we've got our Property Developer Network group, and we've also got our development site Deal Hub group. Happy for you to go and join those communities and continue the conversation. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to jump over to Facebook and see what questions have been coming through from everybody and see if I can answer any of your questions in around, I guess, the topic for today, which is clearly how to improve your credit file. So give me 2 secs while I bring this across. And okay, see who we've got there. And very, very quickly, whilst I'm thinking of it, I'm just going to paste in here the URL for registering for that event. Okay, I can see lots of people saying hello. So hi, Peter, Frank, Sean, Harry, Elizabeth, Penny, and Adam, and more. K Wong says, hi, Rob. If I was 3 days late to pay my utility bill, which was less than $100, will that change my credit rating? No, K Wong, it likely won't. So as I said, it's $150 plus it's 60 days before it actually hits your file. So it needs to be the combination of those two. But, you know, if you don't pay this $100 and next time it's another $100, that kind of will accumulate, and then it potentially will add up at that point. So be very, very careful there, mate. Peter says you can log into Experian through finder.com.au and we'll keep you up to date for free. Absolutely, Peter. All three of those providers that I touched on before all have three. So there's Experian, there's Equifax, and there's also Ilion. All three of them have the ability to, and what I might do is I might very quickly, just because you've said that, I might very quickly just paste that into the chat window so everybody can see where they can actually go for those free reports. Whoops, I may have pasted it twice. Let's see what happens. Nope, just the once. So I've just put all of those into the chat window now, mate. So all three providers will give you a free service, but you can also pay for the additional service, which will give you more alerts and every single time somebody touches your file. And lots of more people saying hi. So hi, Audrey and Luke and Rachel and Prashanth. Rachel says file access of 34. Why so many? Is that a bad thing, good thing? Is it a concern? So no, Rachel, that's for the last several years. And so every single time I go and get a new mobile phone plan, for example, every single time I update my credit file, every time I'm doing anything like that, somebody will do a search. Somebody like Telstra will do a regular 3 monthly search to make sure that it's actually up to date. So there's, 34 in itself is not bad. It really depends on what they are. So I have checked out every single one of them. I can assure you I have no issues or concerns with any of them, but I do thank you for your concern on that one. Julie says, for debts, you can also request full and final settlement. Creditors accepting 40 to 50% settlement on outstanding balance, or request credit account to be closed off so it stops accruing interest, and then make hardship arrangements for outstanding balance. That's what I was touching on before, Julie. I guess if you are going to be in genuine financial hardship and you can demonstrate that genuine financial hardship, then many creditors will actually negotiate cents on the dollar with regards to how much they actually get in return. Because if you are going to pay nothing because you're going to go bankrupt, they would rather receive something. And you can negotiate that to make sure that, one, as you said, it stops accruing interest, and two, that it doesn't actually hit your credit file and actually goes back and cleans up anything, for example. So Vince says, paying off your credit card in full each month, does that lift the score? Vince, paying it off in full doesn't lift the score. Just paying the minimum repayment lifts the score. But paying it off in full is going to demonstrate that that your credit worthiness, the bank that you are with, they're going to see that you're always paying it off. So that individual bank would be happy to lift. But any other bank outside of the one that you're with probably won't have that level of visibility. So hopefully that one clears that up, mate. Peter says, I want everything good to go before privacy statement. Absolutely, mate. As I said, that's the golden rule, is don't sign the privacy statement if humanly possible. Felicity says, love the secret sauce. That one little hint is gold. Thank you, Felicity. I will actually like that right this very second. I'm actually going to give that a love. If it comes up, there it goes. Peter says 6 p.m. here now. Yes, mate. Because of daylight saving, a number of you in Sydney and Melbourne will be at 6 p.m. And Western Australia, I'm not 100% sure how that translates with daylight saving, but I know that they are 2 hours different normally. So I'm not sure if that makes them 3. John says, awesome, thank you, no problems. Rachel says, read the secret sauce. Once you've signed the privacy statement, do they do a check on your credit file anyway? So once you've signed it, Rachel, they have the ability to check it. Whether they do or not depends on whether or not they are satisfied with what you have already provided them when you gave them your credit file in the first place. So I've had instances where they absolutely do check it. I've had other instances where they take the report that I've given them at face value. So it's hard to tell that one. Felicity says she's replying to Rachel, so I'll leave that one at that. Julie says, would private lenders such as Private Mortgages Australia, we had present yesterday, run a credit inquiry? Almost certainly, Julie. They would probably do not only a credit inquiry, but they would also do a thing called a PSMA search to see whether or not you've got any debts on your private file, which is unsecured debts. So hopefully that helps there. And Felicity says, just applied for my credit file. Yay. Well done, Felicity. As I said, go get it from all 3 of those providers. You'll find that 99% of it will probably be the same, but that's that one little ticket of gold that might be the one that you're looking for that's going to help massively with regards to, one of those last elements that you want to slip off in 2 years' time. But if you haven't seen it, how do you know to clean it up? John says, income goes up, expenses don't change. Does the credit score improve? No, John, to the best of my knowledge, your income doesn't actually make it onto your credit file. It's really just the debts that you have accumulated and your ability to service those debts. I don't believe that your income goes onto there. I could be wrong, but to the best of my knowledge, no. Zachary says, hey, great session. You're welcome, mate. No problem at all. Audrey says, I help manage a few of my dad's properties and sometimes register for utilities under my name when the property is untenanted. I've noted those addresses on my credit check, but did not realize it affected the score. How do I get them removed, Equifax or utility company? So Audrey, that's actually a fantastic thing that you've actually highlighted, because if it's your dad's account, you're actually taking on the file in your name. You're the one actually getting the improved credit score because you're actually paying those bills. And he's not getting any benefit from the fact that he's paying those bills on time. So he's the one actually getting ripped off in this instance. However, if they don't get paid, then that will be a black mark on your name. So now the best thing that you can do in those instances is demonstrate to the utility provider that the rates account or something along those lines is actually in your dad's name, and get the ownership of the account transferred over into your dad's name. That way he'll then accumulate the good credit score, assuming he pays on time, and you won't get any bad score if he doesn't. Jason says, I have a score of 718, which is very good. Trying to get above 800. I've got a small personal loan and one active credit card with a low limit. How can I improve the score? Jason, I can't give individual advice, mate. Just not allowed to, for legal reasons, to give financial or legal advice. What I can say as a whole is the tips and tricks that I've given on this presentation is to have several kinds of loans. So not just a credit card, not just a personal loan, but maybe a car loan, maybe a home loan, those sorts of things. Once you start accumulating a few of them, that will start to improve the score. But it will don't go applying for all of them in one hit. You want to do a slow and steady approach to just incrementally increase it up. That said, 718 is a pretty good score, mate. It does show that you are reliable and a good, I guess, a good investment. But you know, they're really looking for scores 750 and above as to, I guess, where they start doing things like changing interest rates to say, well, actually, you're actually a super reliable person. So maybe with the existing credit card that you've got, maybe you could think about have a little bit larger limit or something like that. Something minuscule like that would possibly help significantly just to tip you, I guess, towards that 800, mate. But yeah, take that as general advice only. Michael says, just applied as well. Thanks for the tips. No problem at all. Prashant says, great info. Thanks, Rob. No worries. And Audrey says, that's because my dad is overseas. Understand, Audrey. Yeah, I don't know how to solve that one. Yeah, get a postal redirect is probably what I would say. Make sure the invoices are in his name, but sent to your postal address, and you can make sure they get paid on time. Karen says, I have a 1K overdraft. It was on my credit report. I have an excellent C credit score. Very good. Audrey says, thanks, Rob. I pay the bills from rent and always on time. Very good to know. Sean says, thanks, Rob. Great session as always. And Jason says, cheers, Rob. Okay, folks, we're coming up to the hour and I appear to have run out of questions. So I'm going to say thank you all. It's always a pleasure as always. And I will see you next week. Don't forget, next week there is no Sunday session, but instead there is the special session, which is the half-day event called the New Rules of Property Development. I've just put that link back into the chat window again. RSVP for that. We are very much looking forward to you there. It's a good, solid 4 hours of quality content, as always, and I'm looking forward to helping you out on your journey. Thanks, folks. I'll see you all next week. Bye for now.